When Denis Villeneuve set out to adapt Frank Herbert's Dune for the big screen, he knew it wouldn't be easy. After all, Dune has been called unfilmable. The books were so complicated. He not only had to condense the complex story into a digestible movie format, but he also had to capture the essence of characters that are iconic in sci-fi literature. It was undoubtedly a tremendous challenge, but looking at his first two films, it's fair to say he did a great job. Of course, like any adaptation, he had to make numerous changes, but most of them were well received by both fans and critics alike. However, not everything was perfect. If there was one change that stirred up some debate among fans, it was his take on Chani. Because Villeneuve's version of Chani is quite different from the Chani we know from the books. In many ways, his version is a character better suited to our times. She's more active, more skeptical, more relatable to a modern audience. She's pointing out the questions we should ask, voicing the doubts we should feel. But in the book, Chani is deeply tied to Fremen tradition. She's a Sayyadina, a religious figure, and her faith in both Fremen prophecies and Paul is absolute. She's not just a believer in the Fremen way of life, though. She's a product of it. Every aspect of her life is dictated by the harsh realities of Arrakis. Water is precious, waste is sin, and survival depends on community cohesion. In such an environment, skepticism is a luxury someone can ill afford. Belief in their traditions, in their prophecies, in their eventual triumph over their oppressors is what keeps them going. So in this context, Book Chani isn't just believable, she's almost inevitable. This also explains her devotion to Paul, as her belief in him is not merely personal, it's cultural. Psychologically, this also makes sense. Studies have shown that in extreme environments, belief systems can become a crucial survival mechanism. They provide hope, unite communities, and give meaning to suffering. The anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski observed this phenomenon among the Trobriand Islanders, noting how their magical beliefs helped them cope with the uncertainties of ocean fishing. But Villeneuve's Chani challenges this paradigm. Instead of being a reflection of her people, she becomes a bridge between the audience and the world of Dune. On one level, it's actually a good narrative choice, because it allows Villeneuve to foreground the cautionary aspects of Herbert's story, the dangers of charismatic leaders and religious fanaticism. It also serves as a counterpoint to the religious mania displayed by characters like Stilgar. In doing so, it makes the Fremen feel more like a real society, with its own internal conflicts and diverse perspectives rather than a monolithic culture. However, it also creates a paradox. It makes her an impossible character, because the culture and ecosystem she grew up in simply wouldn't produce someone with her perspective. Because the Fremen are not just a group of people living in the desert, they are the desert. So in this context, having a character who somehow develops a modern, skeptical worldview just feels off. I mean, it's like imagining a medieval peasant suddenly developing a postmodern critique of feudalism. It's not impossible, but it requires an explanation or a reason for this divergence from the norm, and in the movie we don't really get that. This change becomes particularly glaring when we consider Chani's background, because as the daughter of Liet Kynes, she's not just any Fremen. Her father was the imperial planetologist secretly working for the Fremen dream of terraforming Arrakis, so this dream is actually a legacy that drives her. It's what makes her support Paul so fervently. She sees in him the potential to make her father's vision a reality. Moreover, Villeneuve's portrayal not only clashes with Chani's background in the books, but also fundamentally alters her character arc. Because in the book, Chani's journey is one of steadfast loyalty, of balancing personal love with political necessity. For example, she accepts Paul's marriage to Irulan, not because she likes it, but because she understands the political realities of their world. Movie Chani, on the other hand, rejects this. She storms off, unable to accept the political necessities of Paul's position. It's a more satisfying and relatable moment, yes, but it also feels inconsistent with the world Herbert created. Because the Fremen, and Chani in particular, aren't meant to be relatable to a modern audience. They're meant to be alien, to challenge our assumptions about how people might think and behave in a radically different environment. By making Chani more relatable, more modern, I think the movie loses some of the alienness that makes Dune so compelling. It smooths over the cultural differences that Herbert used to explore themes of ecology, religion, and politics. Still, that doesn't mean Villeneuve's choice is wrong. I think this deviation is both the strength and the weakness of his adaptation, because his decision to change Chani's character so drastically is understandable from a modern storytelling perspective. As I mentioned earlier, it gives the audience a relatable viewpoint character. It also allows for a more overt critique of the messianic narrative that Paul embodies. What's clear is, though, both versions of Chani reflect the times and cultures that produced them. Herbert's Chani is a product of a world shaped by scarcity and survival, where individual desires are often subsumed to the needs of the community. On the other hand, Villeneuve's Chani is more recognizable to us, a woman questioning the structures of power around her. After all, Herbert's Dune was published in 1965. The way it deals with issues of colonialism, environmentalism, or the dangers of charismatic leaders was groundbreaking for its time. But our world has changed. Our understanding of these issues has evolved. So when Villeneuve adapts Dune for a 2023's audience, he's not just translating words on a page to images on a screen. He's translating across time, across shifting cultural norms and expectations. And Chani becomes a focal point for this translation. In this light, Villeneuve's Chani becomes not just a character, but a question, a provocation, a challenge to engage not just with Herbert's world, but with our own. But is that what we want from Dune? Is that what Herbert intended? Because for me, the beauty of the original Dune was its alienness, its ability to immerse us in a culture so different from our own. By making Chani more relatable, more like us, do we lose something essential about the story? I think this brings us to a larger question about adaptations. When we translate a story from one medium to another, what are we obligated to preserve? Is it the plot, the characters, or is it something more intangible? The feeling, the themes, or the underlying message? Clearly, Villeneuve believes it's the latter. By changing Chani, he's attempting to make Herbert's intended message clearer. From the very beginning, he's trying to show us that Paul's rise to power is not the straightforward hero's journey it appears to be. Yes, it's a bold choice, but once you see it from his perspective, I think it's not a huge change that undermines the core of Dune. Especially when we consider recent character deviations in other adaptations, at least Chani's change tries to stay true to the main themes of the source material. Instead of changing characters to push some agenda, Villeneuve is trying to emphasize the themes and ideas of Dune through this different version of her. At the end of the day, whether you see these changes as an improvement or a betrayal likely depends on what you value most about Dune. If it's the world building, the alien culture of the Fremen, then movie Chani might feel like a step in the wrong direction. But if it's the underlying themes, the warnings about the dangers of messianic figures and unquestioning faith, then perhaps this new Chani serves the story in a way her book counterpart never could. As we continue to adapt stories like Dune, we're not just retelling old tales, we're engaging in an ongoing dialogue about what these stories mean to us, how we relate to them, and what we want from our narratives. In that sense, every adaptation, every change becomes a mirror reflecting our own cultural moment. So the next time you find yourself frustrated by a change in an adaptation or excited by a new interpretation of an old character, take a moment to consider why. What does your reaction say about your own values, your own expectations? What does it reveal about the way you engage with stories? Because in the end, that's what stories like Dune are all about. They're not just entertainment, they're tools for understanding ourselves and our world. And sometimes it takes a change, a disruption, to make us see these familiar stories in a new light. So perhaps movie Chani serves a crucial purpose. Because she makes us question, she makes us think, and she makes us engage with the story in a new way. And I believe this is what great storytelling is all about. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a comment, give a like, and click to subscribe. Your support will greatly help the mysterious algorithm notices me. And if you want to support me personally, you can join the channel by using the join button. See you next time.